This is Richard Wolff from Democracy at Work, responding to another Ask Prof. Wolff question. This one comes from Caden. And Caden has been reading some of the philosophically tilted work that I've done in my lifetime, where Caden encountered, quite rightly, the concepts of overdetermination and a few other ideas like that. And I wanted to respond. The question Caden asks is, how did I come to think that way? And I'm going to answer that, but I want to start by making sure we are kind of all on the same page about what this is. And here's how it is explained, at least the best I can do on a basic level. One way to think about how and why things happen in the world is to use the notion of cause and effect. Anything that happens, why you chose a red sweater to wear today, or why interest rates are going up, or why there was a civil war in the United States back in the 19th century. Whatever the question, the object of your question, the topic, you can ask, and most people feel comfortable, what was the cause of that event? And by that, you mostly mean, what were the main things that brought it about? What was happening in your head that made you choose a red sweater? Maybe you saw a film the other day that really moved you, and the characters were wearing red, and you were kind of wanting to identify with them. Or with the Civil War, you might say the struggle over slavery here in the United States was the cause that then erupted in a war. In other words, you look for one or two or three major factors, major causes. In philosophy, we say the determinants. What determined that you would wear a red sweater? What determined that a civil war would happen? That way of reasoning is so common that for an awful lot of people, it seems simply natural, normal, the way everybody always thought, the way you should think. But it isn't any of those things. It's not normal, it's not natural, and it surely hasn't been the only way. For thousands of years, people who are interested in how things work in the world, people who are sometimes called ontologists. How does the world work? How do we know how the world works? People like that, usually philosophers of one kind or another, they have asked their questions and they have figured out, among many important things, that there are other ways to look at the world that cause and effect. And one of the most important, in my mind, has been the one that got the name overdetermination. And the idea there was that things that happen are never the result of one or two or three causes. They're always the result of all the other things going on in the world. And that things to be explained, if you're really going to explain why something happened, whether it's your choice of the red sweater or of the Civil War, you're going to have to look at all of the causes. And there are, get ready, millions of them. In fact, in philosophy, we say the causes of everything that happens are infinite in number. Now, you can dispute that, but this idea has been developed by some pretty smart folks, and they can answer you. Let me give you a couple of examples. Why did you pick the red sweater? Well, red is a color that means a lot to you. You're conscious of some of the ways red is important to you, but you have an unconscious in your brain that also assigns meaning to red. You're not even aware of what are some of the causes. And now, if you think about it, all psychology teaches you that life is about discovering many of the causes of your behavior that you did not know were causes, because you had a reason to hide from them, to overlook them, to miss their importance. Psychotherapy takes you through that process in the belief that it will be therapeutic, make you feel better. It's Freud, by the way, Sigmund Freud, who first developed this overdetermination idea when he explained dreams. The first great work Freud wrote was called The Interpretation of Dreams. And his answer was, dreams are bits and pieces that you recall after you wake up that were put in your brain by literally everything you saw, you heard, you did, you thought about in the previous weeks, months, years, in other words, an infinity. And here's the problem. You can't know which of those many factors was more important. Because in order to know which are the key factors that cause something, you'd have to look at all the factors, check them out, and realize that this one is more important than that one. But you can't check out an infinity of factors because you'll die of old age before you get through it. Nobody has ever done that. In other words, when you come up with the key causes of anything that interests you in life that you want to understand, why did this happen? You can't explain it because nobody ever explained anything. If by explanation you mean accounted for the causes that made it happen, because you can't do that. That's not available to us. We don't live long enough. We don't have the mental capacity to do it. And you shouldn't be too troubled, because the idea that you really know the truth of something, you really know what made it happen, has always been a fantasy in this point of view. You can't do that, and it shouldn't trouble you. How troubled are you that you cannot, by training, leap over the Empire State Building? You probably haven't lost 1 minute's sleep by the fact that you just can't do it. You make a good life without obsessing over the fact that you can't jump over the Empire State Building. In the same way, you figure out that you can't understand what happened, if by understanding you mean account for all the reasons why it exists, explain it in that sense. Well, then what were people doing when they thought they were explaining things? Here's the answer overdeterminists give. We can't handle more than a few causes of anything. When we're asked, why did you pick the red sweater? We tell them 2 or 3 things, the people who ask. And those were among the causes. But were they the most important causes? Who knows? To know that they were the most important, you'd have to compare them with all the others as causes, and no one has done that. Certainly not you. So what's really interesting about explanations is not that they account for what they say they do, because they can't do that. What's interesting is, what did that person pick to link to what was to be explained? When I asked you about your red sweater, why did you talk about your friend Mary, who loves red, or the red storybook that you go to sleep with every night? It tells me about you much more than it tells me about the object you thought you were explaining. And why am I taking all this time to tell you about it? Because when we try to account for what happens in the world, for example, the war in Ukraine as we speak, all that you have are different people who link that war to a few things. Explain the war? Nobody can do that. What's interesting is how different people pick a few things and tell a story, which is all explanations ever were, stories. So Russia tells a story that NATO is threatening the country and they're defending Russia by attacking Ukraine. And Ukraine's Zelensky tells a story that Putin is a madman and that the Russians want to take over Europe and Ukraine is the first step. Completely different stories, completely different explanations. And that's what the world is, a place where different explanations struggle for our agreeing or disagreeing with them. But the search for the absolute truth, what is the right story, that's not available. We can't know that any more than we can jump over the Empire State Building. Overdetermination is a different way of understanding what's going on in the world, including how you and I exchange stories about what we think it's important enough for us to think about and to create such stories about. And to Caden's question, how did I come to this? By reading Hegel, the great German philosopher back in the 18th century who taught that and who made it clear. And his number one student, Karl Marx, who took it and applied it to the way the world works. And since then, the greatest of the thinkers in the Marxist tradition, Lenin, Gramsci in Italy, Lukács in Hungary, Althusser in France, and many more. They taught that there's a new way of thinking and acting in the world, but part of what makes it new and different is a different way of understanding how the world works, an understanding that puts aside the old idea that every effect has a cause and that we as human beings can figure out what that cause is. If discussions like these strike you as interesting and not philosophically too esoteric, then please join with us, share these videos, explore their meanings and their implications. One way to do that is also to support us in our effort to cross the 300,000 mark of subscribers to our YouTube channel. That helps us extend our reach. It's an easy act, doesn't cost any money, and we urge you to consider joining us in that way. And of course, any other support, easy to do by going to our website, democracyatwork.info. And for all of that and your indulgence, thank you.